So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the second tabernacle services, where we find the Aramaic English translation of the word. And this translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end as per Yeshayahu the prophet. We find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. As we read then Yeshayahu the prophet, then we ask the question, why Israel has destroyed its own prophets? This truly is the question that every nation of this world, except Israel itself, should ask. Because as we read the Bible or the Holy Instructions, we read a record of what then these holy men that were inspired by the Holy Creator, yet they were despised and rejected by the nation of Israel. Now then, why Israel has rejected these holy men? Some examples are given, while then the Messiah himself spoke very plainly, and he said, O Israel, Israel, you have then destroyed the prophets whom the Eternal has sent. The Messiah spoke these because as he was explaining the holy instructions, people then simply rejected what the Messiah was saying. So then, the Messiah gave the example because it was trivial for Israel to reject the prophets and destroy them. And the Messiah was a person also that was rejected by its own people. So then, the world itself is in such situation where then it's not only a person or a being or a spirit or a religion. The world is transitioning itself because there is a system, and this system must be implemented. Now we know from Daniel 11 that China, the kingdom of the East, leads this period of time, and also explains Daniel 11 regarding then this alien God or alien spirit being bringing much knowledge. It is very plainly, let's say for instance, when a person reads the Bible, firstly then a person is reading a record of the Greco-Roman nations trying to translate these documents, and unfortunately they did not have the background. Imagine this: Israel itself had rejected and destroyed its own prophets, though they have the knowledge of the holy instructions, and yet they reject these holy men. You can imagine then translating a document from the originals from a nation, and this nation rejected the prophets, and then other nations trying to then translate these documents and live by them. So you can understand the discrepancy of time. So as far as understanding what the problem is with the world, and the blame game and the devices and scheming, the world has done this for more than 1,000 years because the holy cities were no more. During this time and period, we understand China leads this new system, and every monetary system of this world must be linked somehow, some way with China. It must be linked. It does not mean being dependent, but it means linked. Now, Daniel 11 explains sections of the holy instructions as far as tabernacling, or then the establishment of the vision is none other than tabernacling on the land of Cush, and this place is then modern day Sudan. There is the northern Sudan and the southern Sudan. The capital is then Khartoum, and most of those places are at war. Let me give an understanding of a similitude of this place related with tabernacling, but not tabernacling itself, but then an understanding, so then we can have a similitude understanding. For instance, computers, telephones, the new space age, electronics, they have a mineral named coltan. It's more expensive than gold. Many people, they don't have any clue from where this mineral is coming from. So then it's coming from Congo, a very much underdevelopment of a place, yet bringing so many riches. And then many people, they enjoy their telephones and their computers and then laptops. They don't have a clue of what kind of material is used in their computers and where it's coming from. When you observe the marvelous creation, for instance, in quote, related with a telephone, for instance, the amount of data, image, if you did not have coltan, you would have to have a much larger electronic equipment, as if you understand the first telephones that were handheld by then a special leather casing. So then tabernacling, it is a similitude of what then this great prophet Yirmiyahu was trying to explain, and he was murdered because of it. Yet what Yirmiyahu the prophet said, it was active for 1,000 years. Thus then, the situation of the 1,000 years of the Savior, of the 1,000 years of the Messiah, and there are so many people preaching that 1,000 years is yet coming, and then only the situation then, or some sort of other understanding, they can say that in the 1,000 years of Nahashatan. Whereas if you observe then the holy instruction, then both periods are then past. So then the restoration period explains then a transition from then a system combined as it was during the time of Nimrod, an economical system and a religious system. And as we understand, Nimrod was a great hunter, but he wanted to make himself God, and then he mixed economical situations and divine situations of what he believed was then divine, and he made himself God or a divine being. So then this period of time is then explained on Daniel the 11th chapter as then the kingdom of the East leading this economical system and the nations being linked with it. And we can give an example. If we read Daniel the 11th chapter, verse 39b, and explains then the fourth and then with a God with a non-capital G, and then a foreign God whom knowledge shall then be increased. So when you read from the Israelic lineage, when you read from the original manuscripts, you understand then the context and content of these layers. Then if you read from the Greco-Roman translation, and that's the point, the Greco-Roman translation, then the content and the context makes you understand what you are reading then is past, far gone, in an era where then our time period does not belong to those time periods of the past. When you read the Greco-Roman translation, you instantly identify it as then obsolete. When you make an inventory of your life, and when you think you are not worthy for some reason, try to understand this fact. The prophets, they were rejected and murdered. So if you think then a situation in the world worse than destroying the prophets, any other understanding that you have makes you worthy in comparison with. And precisely then the rejection of these prophets were then involved with the coming of the Messiah. Few instances, Daniel then speaks of kingdom of the north, kingdom of the east, and kingdom of the south. However, the kingdom of the south is very much mixed. The kingdom of the south, then, there is a situation regarding Egypt, where then the place where the sons of Ishmael they gather, or then the Islamic State is organizing itself. Or then there is a situation regarding then tabernacling, because they are then the kingdom to come government, and there is a point of southbound. In each of these they have its own place. So then when we read these then the distinction must be made. For instance, some of the Hebrew words where you read them plots, they are not truly plots. Some places where you read them lies, they are not lies. Because we are speaking of a system. And then United States has a very important place on Daniel, the 11th chapter, and they are going to come out of it very wealthy. Because there is a link with a system, where then there is the structuring or leasing of an existing system and making it very profitable. Now we are talking of a system not yet in practice. Now, if he is already unique listening to this, while we are at the very starting point of this new system, you can imagine then the prophet Yeshayahu explaining this some 2,700 years ago. And Yeshayahu had the reason. Next time we're going to evaluate more Daniel 11 from the perspective of a system. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.